كلمة الآن عن آليات تحقيق التنمية المستدامة من خلال الربط بين الأهداف الربحية والأهداف التنموية. رحبوا بكلمة السيد داميان ريجان مدير شركة برايس ووترهاوس كوبرز الشرق الأوسط. تفضل يا فندم. احنا عندنا سماعات للترجمة اللي حضراتكم عايز سماعات الترجمة موجودة في الخلفية ورا، اللي حضراتكم عايز أي سماعة يتفضل ياخد.
Someone will tell me in your time, is that correct? There we go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Damian Regan from PricewaterhouseCoopers. I'm based in Dubai and have been in the region for 18 months. I would like to thank the CSR Forum for inviting me to this event today. And I would also like to thank... Mike, can you hear me? Am I able to move forward a bit? I can stand on that, can I? Like yourself, I need a bit of height. I'm Damian Regan, PwC. I'm based in Dubai and have been in the region for about 18 months. I'd like to thank the CFR Forum for the invitation today and also to the translators who will be translating this potentially for some of you. I have told them that English speak very quickly and very crisply, so if I'm speaking too quickly, for them to tell me to slow down and to put your hands in the air. So if I see a forest of hands in the air, I promise to slow down. I've been asked to talk about Egypt, land of opportunities to achieve sustainable development, but not being Egyptian and with many more people more qualified than I in the audience today to speak on that, I focused a little bit more on the mechanics of achieving sustainable development by linking the business goals themselves to the businesses. PwC created a report last year which is From Promise to Reality. Do business really care about the SDGs? And it's a very comprehensive report. It interviewed over 700 companies in 21 countries. And I think taking the findings of that report, whether we were talking to businesses about how they were incorporating SDGs, hopefully we can bring that to this region and to Egypt in particular today to talk about how we can get business to actually integrate the SDGs. Now, I was actually in Egypt last week. I was speaking at the Financial Regulator Authority on ethics and corporate social responsibility. Is there a problem with this? I'm okay with this, thank you. About global investment performance standards, assisting asset managers present and not represent their track record to the market. We talked about ethics in the asset management industry. And today we're talking about social development goals. So it's been a good week for me to actually work here in Egypt. The SDGs, of course, were adopted in September 2015 by over 193 UN member states, and many of you will be very, very familiar with these, of course. There are 17 goals incorporating economic, environmental and social impacts, underpinned by 169 targets. That's very encouraging, a framework to be used by business, and it is business indeed that is pushing this forward. If I just click to this quote, this is from the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Now is the time to mobilize the global business community as never before. Trillions of dollars in public and private funds redirected toward the SDGs, creating huge opportunities for responsible companies to deliver solutions. I understand there's potentially $12 trillion available for opportunities, with the resulting opportunities for jobs and welfare to be rolled out on the back of the SDGs. This is a fantastic opportunity for business to actually step up into SDGs. Now, the SDGs, of course, are displayed in the boxes here at the front and on screen. Not many people can remember all 17, but the icons themselves are memorable. It's wonderful that I can see them in hieroglyphics here at the front. Having spent the last 2 days as a tourist, contributing to the economy, looking at the pyramids and the Cairo Museum. I've been surrounded by hieroglyphics, so this is my third day of looking at hieroglyphics. But it's great to see the transfer into something that's particularly Egyptian, and hopefully the SDGs will become relevant to society. Now, the SDGs themselves, as we mentioned, had 169 targets with 200 plus indicators. So for some businesses, this is actually quite overwhelming. How does a business actually take this knowledge and do something with it? How many people do they need within the organization to fully understand these and incorporate them into business decisions? Well, there are materials available, and today I'll show you some of the materials, one of which is an analysis of the goals and targets. A document was prepared with PwC's assistance, which helps to explain how the SDGs work and how businesses can incorporate them. Now, some people believe that the SDGs are simply 17 and they are all independent. In fact, they're not particularly independent. There is a knock-on between many of those. If we take an example, growth and employment, there is a link between growth and employment and inequality and education. In order to grow and have employment, one needs to have education and to recognise equality in the workplace. That may be a positive thing. If we look up to number 16, peaceful and inclusive society, that's a link to growth and employment. Where there is high growth and employment, that is great, and that's security for the nation. Where there is high unemployment, that causes turbulence and challenges. And having a large population of young males in particular gives great opportunity, but also creates great challenges for that country. It's important, therefore, for companies to think that they are, when they're constructing SDGs, not thinking just about the SDGs, but how they interact with each other. Now, there are many ways to look at the 17 SDGs, and I'm going to show you just two now. One is to see it as a difference between the biosphere, the society, and the economy, with the biosphere being somewhat larger and more potentially aspirational for the environment, working right down to the economy, and that's often where the business sees itself, actually at the forefront of economy driving forward. But of course, for other individuals in that area, they may see themselves being more related to the society aspect, or potentially to the biosphere itself. Another way to see these is perhaps in this format, looking at how the SDGs are delivering peace, the planet, people, prosperity, and partnership. The idea here is you could take the SDGs and actually identify which ones tie into one of those 5 areas rather than 17. So here we have peace. Here we have the planet that ties back to the biodiversity. Here we have people, of course, no poverty, no hunger, good health, etc. Here we have prosperity, good jobs, innovation, reduced inequality, and sustainable cities. And there's partnership. So these are just ways to identify the SDGs and try to make it relevant. The minister earlier was talking about how important it is to drive knowledge of SDGs down into society at all levels to get full participation. Now, since the SDGs were actually created, there's been a requirement for countries to effectively take them forward, and voluntary national reviews have been encouraged. I believe 111 countries have so far actually done that. And the voluntary national reviews provide an update of how SDGs are being rolled out within those countries by business. Now, this is the only slide that I'll make specific to Egypt. As I mentioned before, I'm not an expert on Egypt itself, but I'm delighted to see that Egypt's voluntary national review was done last year. I understand it's actually the second national review, so things are clearly moving forward. Now, some of the highlights is that Egypt is mindful of vulnerable groups that are more likely to be affected by stabilisation and programs. The country will not leave anyone behind, and that ties in to the idea that SDGs are not just at business level or society level, but actually they affect the individual in society. Egypt is pursuing an ambitious plan to upgrade its infrastructure across all sectors and regions, and that's absolutely evident. Although I've been here in the region for 18 months and I've been in Cairo maybe 5 or 6 times, I first came as a tourist to Egypt 20 years ago. Some things never change: the pyramids, the Nile, the Cairo traffic. But other things clearly have changed, and that's the economy is driving forward, and people are very industrious. I often think that it is important to go back to the earlier slide and think of the interconnection between the different SDGs. The growth of infrastructure is an important one, but also is the good health and the impact that infrastructure has on the individuals themselves. I'm thinking here of the road systems and the increase in pollution that will come from it, and the drive, of course, globally towards, let's say, electric cars. So it is important to think there is a drive on one area and there is a knock-on impact on something else, but also opportunity. Water scarcity is a particular focus for Egypt, and it's important that countries are looking at what is important to them, and their SDGs are actually focused on relevant local issues, not necessarily global ones. It assists business in actually identifying those and moving forward. So why would a company integrate SDGs into their strategy at all? What's the relationship there? Well, if I go back to the report, and you can see this online, it's free, it's the SDG Reporting Challenge 2018. We're looking effectively at what businesses were doing, because they were signing up to SDGs themselves, saying they were a good thing, but actually, what were they doing? How do they integrate? And that was the focus of this particular report. 729 companies were interviewed, as I mentioned. 21 countries were covered. Unfortunately, the Middle East, Egypt, wasn't one of those countries, but I hope in future years it will be. And 6 industries were focused upon. There was a review of corporate and sustainability reporting, prioritisation by those companies, reporting quality and performance benchmarking, a very large body of work. So what came out of that review? Well, it indicated that over 50% of the 700 of companies in the reporting challenge identified their priority SDGs. And the top 3 for those companies were decent work and economic growth, climate action, and responsible consumption and production. 72% of those companies mentioned the SDGs in their reports somewhere. And 54% of the 50 had SDGs included within their business strategy. So that means 27% actually included SDGs in their business strategy. We were hoping that it would be higher. And that might indicate something. It might indicate that some business, 1 in 4, have looked at the SDGs and placed them into some form of reporting and have not done a lot with them since. But nevertheless, the fact that over 50% are actually identifying SDGs shows some sort of interaction with the SDGs themselves. But there's a lot more to be done. Now remember, this is primarily mature markets, mature financial markets, Europe, the US, etc. So if they haven't yet managed to get SDGs incorporated, you can look at Egypt and then effectively benchmark yourself against these. But of course the SDGs are important and they assist companies be ambitious. A quote here from Peter Backer from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development identifies that businesses that take an active role in leading this transformation and position SDGs as a strategic lens at the core of their operations will be better placed to unlock market opportunities. There are indeed great benefits at looking at SDGs, and we'll go into those in a moment. So where do those companies actually mention SDGs? Well, according to this, there were 5 key areas. The sustainability report itself was where SDGs was most commonly written, and that's what you would expect, perhaps. We then had the small report. The front end of the main annual report had potentially 40%, so that encourages it through to the board level. We then have 19% of the CEO or the chair's statement, which is good. That puts it at the forefront of the business, so just under 20%. Other documents online were 18%, and a separate integrated report 16%. So certainly SDGs are getting mentioned by companies. I guess the question, is this just lip service? Are they just mentioning them without doing much behind it? What was also interesting is if we look at the companies, the corporates, which identified the top three. Most popular business priorities, we mentioned climate action, a decent work and economic growth, and responsible consumption production. With what the citizens think are most important: zero hunger, no poverty, and good health and well-being. They were very similar to the least popular business priorities. So you can see a disconnect between what people wanted the priorities to be and what business wants the priorities to be. Now, again, this may come back to the companies themselves not having fully thought through the SDGs. Maybe they're already familiar with reporting on carbon, water and waste. Maybe they're already thinking about their supply chains. So if that's foremost, how does that reflect on SDGs? It picks up those three. Not a lot of effort. Now, some companies have gone a little bit beyond that. If we look at Danone, who produce dairy products, French company, also here in the Middle East, they've actually looked beyond that slightly because they've actually recognized that they can help some of the other areas, such as no poverty and zero hunger, by reducing some products, having product ranges that are actually for low-income people. So they've tried to say, what can we do to assist other SDGs that are perhaps on the more consumer level than the corporate? It's interesting to see if we top prioritise the SDGs by industry. There are not that many differences between energy, financial services, technology, etc. The top three keep coming back time and time again. I think energy utilities has the yellow one, number 7 in there, of course. But that really is the big difference. Again, this might effectively represent apathy by the companies, or it's simply, in the last sort of 2 to 3 years they've been around, effectively just the first thing that they could identify themselves. So there is still more to be done. So why does it make sense to integrate SDGs into the strategy of the business? Just go through these very briefly. Responsibility. So without the effective business, the SDGs cannot be realised. So companies must take responsibility. The SDGs are there for governance to provide a direction, but for businesses to pick up the baton and run with it. It's important that business recognise their responsibility, as indicated a little earlier by the ministry. And also those companies to be in the market and to talk about those responsibilities. There is partnership between public and private, which needs to be done and can be done. Again, that's been mentioned earlier today. Better performance. It's well known that sustainable companies, those seeking sustainability, are those that are better performing, and gradually data is supporting that from MSCI, among others. Reputation. SDGs reflect society expectations, so performing in line with these expectations contributes to building strong relationships by business, government and the public. You could see that earlier by the disconnect between business and society with regard to no hunger and poverty. Common language. So this is gradually becoming a language which is being used in reporting terms. Traditionally, reporting of companies has been on financial reports, the accounts on an annual basis. Going forward, non-financial information will be just as important, if not more important, to tell us what's happening within the business. SDG actually gives a license to operate to companies. It allows companies that potentially are under threat or are criticised in the market to reinvent themselves. I'm thinking petroleum companies here who perhaps are moving away from stranded assets to more innovative areas of energy. Regulatory changes. If a company is thinking about sustainability and SDGs, they are ahead of the regulator, typically. They're ahead of reporting requirements. They're actually thinking about the big issues before they have to act upon them. And of course it gives opportunities. Danone was a good example of the business thinking there are opportunities here with regard to creating product ranges for low-income groups. Better performance assists investment decisions, and we'll look at that in a moment, but investment decisions by the company, but also investment decisions by the pension funds and people's savings in which companies to invest. A well-run sustainable company is a company that you want to invest in for the future, so it has impact all round. And purpose-led. If purpose-led is purely profit and an ignorance on the impact that that particular company has on society, its sustainability is potentially in doubt. It's important that companies are aware of their purpose in society. So for CEOs, that's quite a challenge to pick up the SDGs and incorporate those in the strategy for the business. There is also a move between corporate responsibility and sustainable development, and that's quite a significant, profound move that's been coming over the last 10 years or so. Traditionally, corporate responsibility was about do no harm. It was the impact of the business on society, the risk side, and what they could do. I'm thinking here, petroleum companies with oil spills, etc. Those were the risks. Food companies, potentially with misrepresentation of what products they have. But there's now a great big push towards sustainable development, which is creating shared value. This is a much more positive and enhancing purpose for the company, looking at sustainability and the future and its impact in a positive way, seeking opportunities. So I'd encourage CEOs to see the whole of the corporate responsibly sustainability word as not as one of covering risk, but as one of covering opportunity. Value preservation was the old style. Value creation is then the new world. And it allows sustainability to move forward and actually become part of an organisation itself, creating opportunities, synergies with stakeholders, aligning objectives of the business. Sustainable relationship with stakeholders, innovative operating models and processes, attracting top talent, because of course people move. Millennials and others are more likely to move to companies that they wish to work with because of their ethical reasons than simply work for the company for 20, 30 years. Improved access to capital. The financial markets are moving in this direction. I mentioned last week I was at the financial regulator speaking at a conference, a workshop on track record for asset managers. There are also discussions about green finance, which is of great interest. When I was in London, I used to work with the Climate Bond Initiative, creating a standard for green finance. Green bonds, green investments, social bonds, water bonds, these are new products, new opportunities to invest in new areas of business. I also, when I was in London, worked with the Equator Principles and the PRI, Principles of Responsible Investing, to see how standards could be used by those organisations to assist in the investment process, whether or not companies could actually go to the market and actually claim that they were responsible and had the right ethical values to attract investment. So I think increased access to capital, it's all linked with this ethical need. So doing good can mean good for business. And it's not just me saying that. If we look at Larry Fink, the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, he actually said, to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Companies must benefit all their stakeholders. That's very important. Larry Fink represents the chairman, CEO of the world's largest asset management company, and where they go, other asset managers follow. If he is looking at the wider shareholder class as an investor in business, then he's recognising the importance of non-financial information as well as financial information, and that's wherein the SDGs lie. So how can you, the CIOs, those speaking to industry, integrate SDGs into your strategy? These are the mechanics, the mechanisms. Well, we recognise there's a four-step approach. We have awareness, prioritisation, strategy implementation, and impact measurement and reporting. If we look at awareness, so creating awareness of SDGs across key stakeholders in the organisation and focus on setting targets, very important for within the business, but it's also important to look outside the business and be impactful on society and stakeholders. Prioritisation allows you to do that, to look inside as well as outside. Setting strategy and implementing is very, very important with regards to identifying which SDGs are therefore important to the business. We mentioned earlier the top 3 SDGs appear to cover most industries. Break outside that mould. Find something different. Find some interaction that is representative really of your core stakeholders and your core business. And impact measurement and reporting. It's absolutely vital to have good reporting, good awareness of what the business is doing, and be able to see how far you are moving towards those targets. We'll just go through each of these 4 points. Creating SDG awareness, you can see here a car covered in the icons, an inner for a suit, big pictures, the iconic icons on football. These are all just ways of getting the message out. The hieroglyphics, it will take the market by storm, I'm sure, but it raises awareness of what this actually is. There is no excuse for not understanding how SDGs work for business. I've heard companies said it's too complicated to take 17 SDGs and apply them to our business with all the hundreds of KPIs. Well, it's not. One can easily go to this particular model. It's a PwC model, the SDG selector that was actually built with government organisations. And all one does is just put in the company or put in the theme or put in your industry, and it automatically shows you which of these SDGs is relevant to you as an initial stab. And within each of the boxes, it then breaks you down to the underlying SDG elements. There's no excuse not to be able to find very, very quickly how the impact could benefit the company. Also, the public can contribute to the SDGs. This is a rather fun way of seeing the SDGs. My kids in Dubai in their school, only 9 and 6, they were introduced to SDGs even at that age in a fun way. And, for example, live better is another way of presenting one of the SDGs. Waste less food and use leftovers. Reuse, repair, recycle, share. And the wonderful collect friends and experiences, not just things. These are different ways of getting into the market, getting into the stakeholders, and making SDGs relevant to them. The second point was integrating SDGs into a company's materiality process. That's understanding the impact. So a great example is Tata. We'll come to this later, but they effectively went through in their report an analysis of the material sustainability issues and able to identify relevant goals and targets and identifying which one of those present business opportunities. And that's really what this is about. It's not simply identifying the SDGs, it's thinking its impact and where the opportunities lie. We mentioned a little bit earlier using inside and outside perspectives to prioritise the SDGs, and there are guides available. We mentioned earlier an analysis of the goals and targets, but there's also integrating the SDGs into corporate reporting, a practical guide. So it is indeed possible to find the materials online and available to companies to quickly appreciate the SDGs' impact. Coca-Cola, another good example, is a company that effectively looked at clean water and sanitation, which you'd expect for a company selling beverages. And this is one of the problems all companies have. If they're using a resource and they become more and more successful, they will use more of that resource. So Kentucky Fried Chicken will have more chicken, Coca-Cola needs more water, and that's the way it goes. So how can they move forward on this? Well, they actually recognised the points of intersection were important. Intersection was the graph we showed earlier with the dots across the page that all interconnected. They were particularly looking at water itself, and of course there's a link between clean water and below the sea, which was the icon, the SDG, which was least popular with business. So they made the link, an important link. They're also looking at responsible consumption of that scarce resource and how they can effectively minimise the use of water within the processing to allow them to use the water for effectively their key product ultimately. Strategy implementation is therefore important. The third area, defining objectives and setting goals. Here, PwC ourselves, we actually are in the market with our own SDGs. We actually are looking for 2030, 100% circular business. We already have in many of our large offices tri-gen systems which are effectively using a variety of different oils from restaurants and other combustibles in order to create heat and air conditioning and electricity. And these sort of ventures are actually, we all try to walk the talk and make sure that we're doing what we say we're doing. Interestingly, on our particular report, we not only identify the SDGs, but we walk through how we actually move forward and what are the KPIs against which we are being measured. And that's, for an accountancy firm, very, very important. The KPIs mean everything. Just returning back to Tata, If one looks at their report, it's very interesting. You can see we have 3 key SDGs identified on the left-hand side: sustainable cities, responsible consumption, and reduced inequalities. And we can see the whole spread of the Tata business itself across motors, across hotels, across steel. Very, very sort of varied output of the company. And you would think in one house that if we're looking at a future where potentially there should be less cars or less pollution, the impact on the business could be catastrophic. But in fact what they've done is to turn their attention to something else, which is electric cars. So for them, they see the electric vehicle market at 83 trillion, going forward 271 billion in 2019. So they recognise an increase in opportunity, a diversification against what they're doing at the moment, to perhaps be even more successful in the future. So looking for opportunities is important here, not just looking at the risks that we said earlier. And the fourth area is about reporting. And we talked about reporting at its abstract level with regard to corporate social responsibility reports. I think 60% of where we found SDGs mentioned was in the CSR report as well. But going forward, integrated reporting is probably even more important. This ties back to Mr. Finks at BlackRock earlier saying it's just as important to have the financial as the non-financial information. So the way forward, GRI will assist in that. Integrated reporting will also assist. So the form of reporting into the market is becoming increasingly important. Now, when I came to the Middle East 18 months ago, I was actually quite surprised by the lack of CSR reporting and certainly from my point of view, the lack of assurance around CSR reporting. But since then, I've been encouraged by the region, and this goes from Dubai through Qatar, Saudi to Egypt, for companies actually wanting to present information, and indeed the regulators to help them do it and encourage them. I was at a meeting only last month in Dubai with the ADGM, which is the Abu Dhabi regulator, and ESCA, which is the Dubai securities regulator. And both were brought together because they're actually they put out a declaration in January to move forward on their sustainability model. And they are recognising the importance of capital markets, of reporting, of driving forward, of green finance. And that's very, very important. And it's good for Dubai to have the regulator doing that. Here, of course, we've had the eighth forum, so that suggests that CSR really has been working its way through the system here for a number of years. But in the last 18 months in my visits, I can see more and more companies actually looking at the reporting. Indeed, even today, I had a conversation with one company that's looking at doing integrated reporting and another company that's looking at doing GRI reporting. And I believe both are speaking at this conference. So that's incredibly encouraging. For me personally, I'm probably here 2 years too early with regard to assurance, but hopefully we're at the stage where there's a lot of support that can be given to companies as they move forward on the agenda. We mentioned earlier the two sort of key documents. So PwC worked with the United Nations Global Compact and GRI to create those two reports. And I would encourage you, if you are speaking with companies, to put them in that focus. But these two reports provide an awful lot of education, a lot of material that can actually be used. And that's one of the key mechanisms, I think, for companies to integrate into their business strategy. Company here, just staying with reporting, Randstad, so that's a human resources company based in Netherlands, but a global company. They've actually created a reporting framework, very small for you to see, but I'm sure the slides will be available for you. But if you look at their report, they make a direct link between people, human resources, their business, and things like diversity and equality. So they absolutely are recognising what is important in society and important within their company and helping to redefine it and move forward. They also have KPIs, very clear KPIs against which they are reporting and being assured. So SDG is a four-step process: awareness, prioritization, strategy, implementation, and impact measurement and reporting. And I think those four steps, if companies decide to go down the route of using SDGs, will make them successful companies. I'm just going to end on this particular slide. And this slide, effectively, it's within our survey, and it's a blueprint for SDG success. 4 steps here as well. So every part of the organisation has a role to play. It's not just a CSR issue. Many companies have CSR teams, but they are effectively not the ones who necessarily are creating the strategy for the business. There's other people in the organisation that do that. The CSR team will assist. They can certainly help with the reporting, the mechanisms for issuing the information into the market, etc. But they're not necessarily the ones creating the strategy. It's much, much wider than just the CSR team. And it's important that companies recognise that. Leadership is key. CEOs and senior executives need to take an active interest in driving progress. The responsibility is absolutely at board level. And that's the level at which risk is, yes, identified, but so too is opportunity. Establishing meaningful KPIs to use to drive action, report on progress. Well, absolutely. The reporting mechanism is important. Without a KPI, how do you know if you've hit the targets? It's just a wishful thinking. And finally, aim for the same quality of reporting on financial and non-financial information. This assists the market. It assists the capital market. It assists people such as Mr. Finks from BlackRock to actually select investments. And it allows regulators and other stakeholders in the markets to fully understand what business is actually doing. So I would encourage you to take non-financial information just as important as financial. Final slide, further reading. So by all means, follow up with reading. Some of you taking photos. I think the slides may be circulated. So we have the two reports I mentioned on the list. Collaboration for Impact. There's the SDG investment case and navigating the SDGs. Very PwC, forgive me for that, but hopefully you can see that there is good information, good surveys, good reports. I would encourage you to use all these as mechanisms for taking SDGs forward. Thank you very much.
طبعا الكلام اللي قاله في غاية الأهمية والكل موجود النهاردة. يعني يمكن أنا أرجو من الأستاذ حسن أن يوزع عليهم هذا الباوربوينت فعلا، لأن ده موضوع المؤتمر. ده الموضوع how to integrate sustainability into core business. حضراتكم موجودين النهاردة وجيتوا في هذا المؤتمر لهذا الكلام العميق المهم. وعاوز أطمن. I would like to inform you all that in our strategic management courses for the MBA, we do integrate all what you said. Water management as part of the reporting, energy management, waste management, how we go towards zero waste, carbon footprint, social footprint, all these types of reports. So I am stressing the importance of your presentation to all the audience here, because I think it is one of the most important, directly related to the objective of this conference. And we should take in all our institutions, in all our private and public organizations, the points that have been mentioned today. And I am really also very satisfied that in our strategic management courses, we do integrate. I will tell you also we do integrate, and now there is a certificate lead in Egypt, lead for the construction, for the proper use of materials, for the sustainable use of electricity in the building, for the design of the building. The LEED certificate also is actually done and given in Egypt. So it is, I think, Mr. Hassan and all the audience, it is a very important, direct to the subject of our conference, and I think you have to look to every detail that have been mentioned. Myself being aware of all this, even life cycle assessment. We will have what we say life cycle assessment, the assessment of the CO2 during the life cycle of a process, of a product, or what. So all this should be integrated, and the resources that have been mentioned by you are also very important. So on behalf of Mr. Hassan, on behalf of the audience, I thank for you for this beautiful and very in-depth presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I was worried I was being criticised then. I was handed the headphones just to check, but that's lovely thoughts, thank you. I'm just responding to one question that came through. What is the main basis for linking profit goals to the development objectives? It's probably worth me having a conversation with the individual who wrote this to make sure I've understood it properly. But I believe that there is an absolute link between profit and development goals. I mentioned earlier that a sustainable business is a good business. It's being recognised by the asset managers as being a better business for future returns and profits. So therefore, investors, the capital markets recognise this. I think society recognises that companies must make a profit to succeed. Indeed, who would want to work for companies that weren't making profits but always losses? So profits are justifiable as long as where they are making profit, they're also effectively profiting society in the impact, positive impact, and looking at opportunities. So I would encourage companies to continue making profits, but to do so with the development objectives in mind. Thank you. Thank you.
يعني الآن تكريم الأستاذ حسن مصطفى رئيس الملتقى السنوي للمسؤولية المجتمعية والدكتور شريف دلاور للسيد داميان ريجان مدير شركة برايس ووترهاوس كوبرز الشرق الأوسط. وبرضه الحقيقة أهداف التنمية المستدامة باللغة الفرعونية. شكرا لحضراتكم. لكن يعني تحيا مصر، تحيا مصر بشعبها العظيم وبجيشها القوي وبرئيس يعشق هذا الوطن.